Welcome back to Raptor-One.
Raptor-One, Voyagers of the Stars. Season 2, Chapter 22, Iron Weather. The corridor with teeth on its breath. They felt it before anyone named it. A draft under an unmarked seam that left a grit on the tongue and the smell of rain on iron. The throat ahead narrowed, then widened in a way the river only does when it's hiding teeth. Ira laid copper, squinting. "Know him? No march," she murmured. "Just air that thinks it's a blade." Varric toggled the hinge. "Old pain, new bruise, my nephew fixed it," and frowned. The clicks came back thin, like something had drunk the fat out of the sound. Tessa's hum lifted to test the room and clipped on something invisible. She winced, rubbed at her sternum. "Metal," she said, surprised. "I can taste it." Cyrus pressed his tongue to his teeth and winced too. Taste of coins. The tiniest static crawled his gums like spectators trying to climb a fence. "Masks?" Chiron asked, already suspicious. "Or posture first?" "Posture," Saran said. "Then masks if posture fails." They made the room unhandsome the way you do when you mean to live in it. Ember to the basin's lip, sling loosened a thumb's width. Tessa's hum dropped to floor, not signal. Ira chalked rests knee-high where panicked eyes never look. Darrow placed 2 guides, low, high, so any threat arriving rude would be offered a chair before it found a throat. Varric laid heat into weather, not progress. Talon scribed a single shallow timing under the grate, then struck it clean from their slate. Chiron pressed erasure posture into the seams. Inventory, interval, dull. Cyrus set no comment on the slab and kept his lens low. The draft did not leave. It learned manners, then smiled with too many teeth. First coughs. It started as a single cough from Talon, more flinch than sound. Then Ira's, thin, apologetic. Tessa swallowed and coughed once, then twice, rhythm threatening to learn itself. Varric rubbed at his scar, eyes narrowing. That slope just sharpened. Anyone else's gums tingling? Cyrus lifted a hand. "Feels like static." And he stopped, cheeks burning. And comments. "In the chest. Like I'm being watched from inside." Chiron's nose bled a thin line. He wiped it with the non-dramatic side of his wrist. "Counting sickness," he said, voice flat. Saran's head tilted. "Explain." "The bin taught us endurance by asking us to appoint a watcher," Chiron said. "We refused the crown. Good. But rooms shift their tests. Iron weather," he nodded toward the ducts, "makes the body keep time for the corridor. You start coughing on counts. Breath becomes a metronome the room can weaponize. If we fall into rhythm, it writes law off our lungs." Ira pressed fingers to her temples. Tinnitus, too. A faint. Ring trying to be a downbeat. "Check in," Tessa rasped, voice safe only because it was ugly. "Here," Cyrus answered softly. "No beacon." The bowls, kind, hummed present in a note the sickness could not catch. "Quarantine, without badges." Saran did not say quarantine. Rooms remember that word and sell it back to you. "Kitchen," they said instead. "Soft lanes, not fences. No registry, no oaths." They shifted the hall under the hood into a place for being human while the river misbehaved. Rope became paths, not walls. Cups out. Water warmed. Ember gentle. Rest where hands would find them without thinking. The hood breathed pride out of the room. The air dimmed into usefulness. Darrow strung a length of rope loosely between 2 guides to mark a clean side from Macare's side. not to divide the crew, but to teach steps where feet would stumble otherwise. He tied the kind of knot that loosens if you pull wrong, tightens if you lean together. Talon set tools to bleach. Varric wiped hinge plates with vinegar that smelled like stubbornness. Chiron wrote a list titled Doing and left it blank so the room wouldn't think it could grade them. Ira, swaying, closed her eyes and let a memory fall into her lap. An archive whisper from Winnow Reach, cracked with static. Silence not the goal, silence a tool. Iron breath undone by Yarrow Weir and salt rest. She opened her eyes. Yarrow, she whispered. We need Yarrow Weir. Part 2. The Map to Yarrow Weir. The garden you can only reach by being tired. They found it tucked in old charts under 5 names, 2 of them contradictory. Yarrow Weir, Salt Garden, Nurse's Spill, the Quiet's Dam, Mouthful of Rain. Places like that hide themselves from forms. They come when you do small things right and refuse notice. Saran traced a path with a pencil they didn't sharpen. 2 ribs forward through rivet narrows. 1 left along basin thread. Service route only. Front halls will sell us oaths. Service route, Darrow repeated, pleased. Kitchens lead to medicines faster than atriums do. Tessa coughed. Once, twice, 3. She closed her eyes hard to break the count. Cyrus's hand was already there. Check in, he said, leaving no room for the cough to turn itself into a headline. Here, no beacon. She caught his sleeve like a sensible person catches a rail. Here, she breathed back. With you. Varric's turn, a harsh cough that wanted to land on force. He toggled the hinge as a counterspell, old pains stuttering the cough out of rhythm. It helped. Barely. Talon's hands shook. A maker's nightmare. They set the knife down farther than instinct wanted. I can build a sieve, they said, jaw tight. Patch the vents to slow whatever this is. Do it, Saran said. Plain materials. No pride. Chiron pressed a token over a new notice, trying to find breath on the panel. Health Authority Registry. The clay hid the rest. No badges, he said, even if they sell them as medicine. The hood sighed. Bowles murmured present. The ship, patient, took up the task of not being a hospital badly, which is how ships get through this sort of thing. Rivet narrows, where air learns to bite. The service route to Yarrow Weir squeezed them through rivet narrows, a corridor whose ribs had been bolted too tight by someone in love with neatness. Air thickened, then split. The coughs took notes. Ira staggered, one palm to the copper. Downbeat, again, can't. She bared her teeth, wrote a rest on the metal with a nail instead of chalk, and let the room see her be rude. The ring in her ear faltered. Darrow put a guide knee-high. 2 threads arrived, tidy, italicized. Posture, soft lane segregation. Posture, quiet neglect. Chairs, he said, and made them sit. The threads hit the guide and learned how not to be policy. Talon slid mesh over a vent, slow and ugly. A sieve, they said, not a filter. Filters brag. Sieves know their place. Varric's cough came again. He growled at it. You don't get to be a drummer, he told his lungs. You get to be weather. He clicked the hinge until my nephew fixed it, and the cough lost interest in being impressive. Cyrus glanced at his lens as if it were an old friend who had brought trouble to the door. He set it farther away and put the tin in its place. Not today, he whispered to both. Tessa leaned her shoulder into his and kept her hum where it belonged, beneath the floorboards. There together steadied the plank everyone else was walking. They cleared the narrows late enough that the corridor got bored. Air thinned. Breath stopped counting itself. The taste of coins dulled to tap water. Half an hour, Saran said. Then we're. Keep moving a little slow. We're. It wasn't a garden so much as a policy that had learned moss. A low spillway of stone ran along the service route's wall, water moving in a sheet as thin as thought. Above it, 100 small fronds hung. Yarrow, but not the kind Ira had pressed in childhood books. The leaves were pale and quiet, edges rounded by patience. The smell was clean wet cloth and unfinished rain. The hostrite was present in caution tape colors and good grammar. Harvest permissions. Declare need, duration, quantity. Ira, sweating, laughed under her breath. It wants us to itemize breathing. Chiron lifted a token just enough to threaten the notice without granting it glamour. We ignore the form and respect the plant. How? Varric asked, eyes glassy with fever. 3 rules, Darrow said, already uncoiling rope. Late, plain, stubborn. He tied a loose loop at each end of the spillway, not to fencing, but to remind hands where not to reach. Rope is honest in both directions. Talon produced a dull ceramic blade. No shine, no point, and offered it to Ira. No knife habit, they warned themselves aloud. Once only. Ira nodded. She spoke to the plant the way she speaks to stars. We need enough for 7 breaths to stop counting, she said, voice frayed. For a day? Maybe 2. She cut 3 fronds and stopped, because stopping is where medicines start. The hostrite tried to send ribbons. Beneficiary list. Dosage schedule. Keeper signature. Chairs, Saran said for the 100th time that week, and Darrow made a bench out of bureaucracy. Ribbons draped and learned cushions. Tessa set the fronds in the embers steam and hummed cooling, not calling. The leaves didn't curl. They listened. Cyrus crushed a pinch with the heel of the NO comment tin, grinding slow. "Oh, brew," he said, and the room didn't turn brew into broadcast because the tin's label swallowed the thunder. Iris salted the water. Span's own tears, she said, tired jokes keeping the cough from finding a beat. Varric hunched on a bench and glared at the cup like a sparring partner. If this turns me into poetry, I'll kick the plant. Please don't, Tessa murmured, mouth trying to smile, eyes trying not to close. Chiron waited until everyone else had a cup first. Suspicion can be manners in a decent coat. Saran held the last cup and didn't drink immediately. Bank, they said, then sip. They banked. Ember to lip. Rest in corners. Sieve reviewed. Rope slack and ready. Hinge and my nephew fixed it. Knife struck through. Token over harvest permissions until the form forgot its own outline. Tin set down where it could be reached and ignored. They drank. Part 3, the uncounting. What it felt like to get better. It wasn't drama. It was less. The cough wanted to stack itself into 4s and forgot how. The taste of coins faded to the memory of water. Ira's tinnitus hushed like a child pressed briefly against a shoulder. Talon's hands found stillness enough for tools. Varric's scar stopped singing. Chiron's nose did not bleed again. Tessa breathed once without measuring it. Relief made her sway. Cyrus's arm was already there. Check in, he said, voice careful with good luck. Here, she answered. No beacon. He added nothing because nothing was the medicine. The hostrite dimmed its ribbons as if it had been thanked correctly and could retire for the evening. On the panel, a line appeared, small, almost shy. Kept. Present. Iris snorted. It learned a sentence we like. Practice, Chiron said, but he didn't sour it. It's practicing. Varric cracked his neck and gave the cup a look that admitted grudging respect. Fine. Thank you, plant. Talon tucked the ceramic blade back in its cloth. Once only, they reminded their fingers. We come back if we need more. We don't turn this into a habit the room can invoice. Darrow rewound rope like a man finishing prayer. Saran wrote a pencil line on the board no clerk would get paid to copy. We uncounted our breath. The cause, named only enough. While the cups dried, the spillway let a second sound into the room. A low tremble the air wears when someone has been turning it over in their hands. Iron weather is fear. Not words, temperature. The weir had stored an old memory. Autumn cold had taught these corridors to police warmth. The primer had come after with permits to monetize the fear. Between them, breath learned to count out its own cage. We'll need to treat the rooms, not just the lungs, Iris said, weariness making her brave. Bread, laughter, rest left behind like crumbs. After, Saran said, and smiled at the accidental pun. We named the hearth for a reason. Cyrus looked at Tessa, then at the tin, then back. One sentence, he said. She nodded. He banked it out loud, plain as a plate on a table. I'm staying with you when it gets worse. Her eyes brightened, not with tears, with steadiness. Me too. The bowls hummed present like approval in kitchen language. Back to the river. They took a bundle of yarrow, quiet, leaves wrapped in cloth, and a bottle of salted water the span would call extravagance and a kitchen would call sensible. The word did not ask for signatures. It had learned where to seed its ribbons. At the service junction, a bright front hall flickered on with an invitation to certify Haven. They didn't even laugh. They took the kitchen way instead, late enough to offend ceremony. On the slab, Saran drew 2 arrows, one back toward hearthless span, in case anyone else arrived behind them needing bread, and one forward toward the iron smell current that had tried to teach their lungs to march. Next throat? Varric asked, testing his breathing like a mechanic testing a repair with ears instead of instruments. Next, Saran said, something with teeth. But we have cups, and rope, and leaves that refuse to be headlines. Check in? Tessa asked, because good habits make rooms less brave. Here, Cyrus said. No beacon. Together, they said at once, and Raptor-One moved, late and plain and stubborn, carrying uncounted breath and a little medicine any kitchen could afford. Behind them, Yarrow let its spillway run slower, as if to remember what they'd taught it. Have what you need. Leave what you can. Breathe without counting. Kits for breathing that won't be counted. They left Yarrow with more than leaves. By the time Gray River widened again, the hall under the hood had turned into a workbench for gentleness. Talon laid out cloth and mesh. Darrow's rope arrived in short, sensible lengths. Ira portioned Yarrow into packets the size of hopeful hands. Varric tuned a fistful of hinges to my nephew fixed it and labeled each with a chalked. Chiron stacked clay tokens crooked. Tessa filled little vials with salted water. Cyrus scuffed the NO comment tin against the deck until it left a constellation of dull stars. Field kits, Saran said, and wrote nothing more than UNC on the slab. Uncounting, a word that was more of a posture than a plan. Each kit, wrapped in scrap cloth that had belonged to a proud table, held A sieve for vents, mesh, not filters, humble, washable. €3 fronds with a note once only, come back if needed. A vial of salt rest for steam. A short rope with a knot that loosens if pulled wrong. A token stamped maybe so no ledger could claim certainty. A hinge tuned to competence without applause. A small card that said, in Ira's hand, have what you need. Leave what you can. Breathe without counting. Cyrus, on impulse, inked a dot between NO and comment on half a dozen spare tins, then tucked one in each bundle. Punctuation, he muttered, cheeks pink. A secret period. Reminds the breath the sentence ends where you say it does. Tessa kissed his shoulder like a stamp that doesn't need a registry. Way stations with surlongs. They delivered kits the kitchen way, never the atrium. Bolt yard, stone wicket, anvil gallery, rooms that had learned to be clean when they meant to be kind. Everywhere the same symptoms. Coin taste, coughs stumbling toward fours, quiet that had learned the shape of apology. At Bolt Yard, a grandmother had hung towels over vents with clothespins that did not fit the dignity of her hands. Talon showed her the sieve and the trick of placing it crooked, so the air forgot how to march. Darrow tied rope waist-high across the door, not to bar entry, but to make steps small. Iris steamed yarrow and salt. The coughs fell apart like bad hymns. Varric tuned the old stove to my nephew fixed it. The kitchen began to sound like a house again. At Stone Wicket, a foreman tried to sign a form the wall insisted was a health authority compliance. Chiron slid a clay token over the signature line, set maybe half covering it, and said, "Put this on a shelf." The foreman did. The form lost interest in itself. At Anvil Gallery, a child stood under a vent with his mouth open, catching the draft like snow. Tessa knelt, put the sieve in place, and hummed floor. The child blinked as if waking. "It's quieter," he said, surprised. Cyrus handed him a rope not the size of a coin. "This is a doorstop for your breath," he said. "If it starts running, put this in your pocket and remember we don't sprint in kitchens." The bowls on Raptor-One hummed present at a distance that felt like approval carried on a good wind. Part 5. The device that wanted to be a drum. Breath quota and the countrite. It took Chiron to find the source behind the symptom. He paused 3 corridors past Anvil Gallery, head cocked the way a man listens for a lie that believes itself a lullaby. A notice blinked on the wall, small, smug. Breath quota met. Who counts breath? Varric growled. Someone trying to sell mercy by the minute, Chiron said, and pointed up. Duck there. Hear the ticking? They pulled a panel and met the machine that had taught lungs to keep time. A compact, handsome thing bolted to the vent like jewelry you're meant to admire, stamped countrite in a font that apologized for itself. A metal tongue fluttered at steady intervals, sipping air, measuring breath, feeding numbers to a ledger that never had to get its hands dirty. "I hate it," Talon said, calm as weather. "Not because it's ugly. Because it's pretty." "Chairs," Saran said. Darrow obliged. Rope to the bracket until the device had a seat it had not earned. Varric loosened 2 bolts. Not yank, loosen, so the mount could remember the dignity of give. Talon wedged a felt pad under the metal tongue, so the flutter muffled into kitchen noises. Ira chalked 3 rests directly on its casing. Tessa laid her hum under the duct until the oscillation forgot the difference between floor and purpose. Chiron pressed a clay token over the quota stamp. Cyrus set no comment dead center on the faceplate like a hand over a mouth. Gentle, plain. The tongue faltered. Tick bled into breath. The countrite sighed, embarrassed, then began pushing air without counting it. It kept doing its job. It forgot the poem it had written about itself. On the panel below, breath quota erased itself too slowly, like a clerk rubbing out a date they had hoped would matter. In its place, airflow, present. Good room, Ira said, and then, because good words also need rests, she left the next observation unsaid. Relapse and rule of once. Not every corridor obeyed after a single nudge. Iron weather is stubborn in places that have taught themselves to keep time to feel useful. At Rivet Narrows, another branch, tighter than the first, Talon reached for the knife a second time before their hand remembered once only. Their fingers shook with the habit of fixing. Tessa touched the back of Talon's wrist and hummed enough. Talon set the knife down farther away than comfort allows and let the room see that restraint. A second countrite quieted of its own accord like a child put to bed by example instead of lecture. Varric relapsed after a fever dream, cough hitching hard into 4. He slapped his chest once, angry. The rhythm loved it. Cyrus, without commentary, timed his breathing to 2 and 4 out loud and let Varric mirror him until the cough got bored of the duet. Ira over-harvested in her head and had to stop her own hands from confessing. I want to take more, she admitted, because saying it out loud turns doctrine into furniture. Darrow tied a knot and untied it where she could watch. See? He said, stopping is a skill. Chiron caught a notice trying to promote itself. HELTHPONTS earned. He placed a clay token on the word points and left health alone. The room had to decide whether it meant bodies or scores. It chose correctly. Saran wrote one sentence smaller than a badge. We fix what needs, not what flatters. The river's taste of coins faded. Part 6. Bread for later. What they left behind. By the time Raptor-One turned from the iron smell throat, Hearthless Span had more than warm benches. It had habits. Sieves set askew on vents like caps on sensible heads. Rests chalked at knee height where children could trace them with fingers. Rope making lanes that taught feet to slow near soup. Hinges clicking. My nephew fixed it like an inside joke no clerk could weaponize. A dozen tins with a little dot between NO and comment, hidden on shelves where hands that shake will find them. In the staff room beside Node 7, the ledger still held up the table. Someone had added a notice in a handwriting built by patience. If the kettle calls, tuck it in. If breath counts, count to 2 and forget 3. The Weir's spillway ran quieter, leaf tips beating water with a modest pride of tools that work. The hostrite had learned a new sentence at the edge of its screen. Kept. Present. Audit. Not applicable. Chiron tapped the glass, amused despite himself. Practice, he said out of habit. Ira bumped his shoulder with hers. Let rooms keep good habits the way we do. Banking the cure. They banked the chapter the way they had banked breath. Ember to the basin's lip. Rest where panic can sit down. Sieves in the tool locker, labeled plain cloth, good manners. Yarrow packet with once written larger than use. Rope coiled on a nail within reach. Countrite bolts logged loosened, not defeated. Primer flake still hidden under Chiron's token. Tin on the slab, lens asleep. Saran penciled a line, then another, then stopped before the shape could turn into doctrine. We uncounted the room. Check in, Tessa said, because this is how love becomes weatherproof. Here, Cyrus said. No beacon. Together, they answered, and the bowls hummed present in a key that sounded like kitchens after rain. Gray River ahead smelled less of iron, more of stone warmed after storm. Somewhere down channel, a throat with a new grammar waited, curious whether the ship that refused badges would refuse something more expensive, praise. Later, Saran said to whatever listened, after soup. Raptor-One moved, late, plain, stubborn, carrying a pocket full of leaves, a coil of rope, and the knowledge that some machines can keep pushing air after they forget how to count it.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to be notified about upcoming releases to the Raptor-One series, please subscribe. This has been a Bad Karma Drone production.